I am an ordinary housewife and mother of 2 children. I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, and I was living a simple but happy daily life. My husband was a computer science professor who was strict, yet warm with his students, and a reliable companion to me. My husband had been nurturing a dream for a long time. Since his graduate school days, he had been working on developing innovative educational software based on his research. I always supported him as I watched him coding in his study on weekends and reading papers late into the night, dedicating himself to his research. Sometimes the children would complain. It seems like Dad loves computers more than us. But my husband would always embrace them and say, "Daddy works hard because of you." After more than 10 years of research, my husband's dream finally became reality. The AI-based personalized learning platform he developed brought innovation to the education field, and various investment companies competed to offer him funding. My husband quit his university position and jumped into business full-time. Within just 2 years, the company achieved tremendous success, and my husband became a respected young CEO in the industry. However, the changes that came with success were completely different from what I had expected. My husband, who used to help the children with homework in the evenings and take the family to movies or amusement parks on weekends, gradually spent less and less time at home. Phrases like, "I have an important meeting," and "I need to meet with investors," became his constant refrain. And he stopped attending family events like the children's school activities or birthday parties. What was even more difficult was that my husband's tone and attitude changed. His previously warm and affectionate demeanor disappeared, and he began talking to me as if I were a company employee. He would only make business-like confirmations, such as, "Did you take the kids to their academies today?" And, "Are things going well with the housework?" He showed no interest in how my day was, what I was thinking about, or anything personal. Even at the dinner table, he mostly looked at his phone, focusing only on company matters. Still, I endured. I believed my husband's success was for our family, and I expected that once this busy period passed, my affectionate husband would return. But as time went on, my husband only grew more distant, and I became increasingly lonely. As my husband's coldness continued, I fell deeper into despair. One night, as I watched my husband come home late again and head straight to his study without even greeting me, I suddenly thought, I need to start living my own life now. While it wasn't exactly revenge, I felt I needed to have time just for myself. Just as much as my husband was ignoring me, I had always enjoyed taking photos. So I found a group online called the Incheon Amateur Photography Club. Initially, it was simply a hobby. It was a group that met during morning hours, when the children were at school or on weekend afternoons, to visit various attractions in Incheon and take photos together. Just getting out of the house and having conversations with other people made me feel much lighter. The club had various members: a retired principal, a cafe owner, working mothers, and people like me, who were tired of housewife life and looking for new hobbies. Among them, a man named Young-min Soo was particularly kind to me. He was a middle school art teacher with extensive knowledge about photography. Yet he had a warm personality and patiently explained things to me, a beginner. "If you shoot from this angle, the light will come in more naturally," Min Soo said, holding my camera and demonstrating. Technique is important in photography, but the photographer's heart is most important. Looking at the photos you've taken, I can feel your warm heart. Every word he said was a great comfort to me. At home, I hadn't had a proper conversation in a month. But here, someone acknowledged and encouraged even my small efforts. Min Soo genuinely admired the photos I took and respected my opinions. I felt the attention and respect from him that I hadn't received from my husband. After club meetings ended, there was time to chat over tea at a cafe with a few members. Minsu always sat next to me and listened attentively to my stories. Stories about my children, small daily worries, and even dreams about photography. Minsu listened seriously to my stories that my husband no longer showed interest in. "You're such a warm person. Your family must be really happy," Minsu said. I could only smile bitterly at his words. My own husband no longer recognized how warm a person I was, yet here was a stranger who appreciated me. I thought this wasn't mere escapism. I considered it a process of finding myself. Precious time to reclaim myself as an individual. The time I spent with Minsu became a source of vitality in my life. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was a valuable person. 2 months after joining the photography club, I grew closer to Minsu. What started as simply a senior and junior relationship in the photography club had become sharing our daily lives with each other. After photo shoots, we often stayed behind alone to chat over coffee. And sometimes we spent time together until evening. "Your husband seems to be late again today," Minsu asked cautiously. I nodded and answered bitterly, "These days he comes home after 10 p.m. Even when he does come home, he goes straight to his study." Minsu looked at me with a sympathetic expression and said, "You must be very lonely." At those words, the emotional wounds I had been holding back burst forth. I confided everything about my relationship with my husband to Minsu. How much my husband had changed, how he treated me with neglect, and how even the children were hurt by not receiving their father's attention. Minsu listened to my story with genuine empathy and said, "Someone like you should be happy," while gently taking my hand. At that moment, I felt something strange. I experienced a flutter I hadn't felt in a long time, along with guilt. But rather than guilt, I thought more strongly, why should I feel guilty? My husband showed no interest in me. So why should I stay lonely by myself? After that day, my relationship with Minsu changed subtly. We met alone more often, using photo shoots as an excuse, and spent increasingly longer times together. Minsu gave me everything I hadn't received from my husband: thoughtful consideration, warm attention, and even the way he looked at me as a woman. I began lying to my husband. I made excuses like, "I'm going shopping with neighborhood friends," or "there's a parents' meeting for the kids," to hide my meetings with Minsu. My husband wasn't interested in my schedule anyway, so he would just casually say, "Okay, be careful coming home." Time spent with Minsu was like being in another world. He noticed even small changes in me and carefully complimented my new hairstyle or the clothes I wore. Words like, "You look really beautiful today," and "that color suits you well," brought me great joy. When I returned home, the cold reality still awaited me. My husband remained indifferent to me, and even during dinner, he only looked at his smartphone. But unlike before, I was no longer hurt. Instead, I thought to myself, now I have someone who appreciates me too. I'm also meeting another man. It was a kind of psychological revenge. Just as my husband treated me with neglect, I now felt a strange satisfaction thinking that I was receiving comfort elsewhere. I knew I was living a double life, but I didn't think it was wrong. Rather, I considered it precious time that brought vitality back to my life. 3 months after my relationship with Minsu began, my husband came home early one evening, unusually. I had just returned from meeting Minsu, and when I opened the front door, I found my husband sitting on the living room sofa, waiting for me. His expression was serious. "Honey, we need to talk," my husband said. His voice was calm but somehow heavy. My heart sank for a moment. Had he discovered my meetings with Min-soo? But I tried to act nonchalant and asked, "What's wrong?" My husband hesitated for a moment, then quietly spoke. "I know you've been meeting another man recently." At those words, I was momentarily speechless. How did he find out? I had always been careful. I asked, "What are you talking about?" But I could see in my husband's eyes the certainty that he already knew everything. "It's the photography club teacher, isn't it? Young Min-soo." When my husband mentioned Min-soo's name exactly, I was completely flustered. "I know why you're doing this. I also know how terrible a husband I've been." My husband's voice carried deep sadness rather than anger. I became angry and shouted, "Then what are you going to say about it now? Do you know how indifferent you've been to me? I've been living like an invisible person." But my husband listened calmly to my words, then brought up an unexpected story. "I'm sorry. There's something I couldn't tell you." My husband sighed deeply and continued, "Actually, I've been suffering from severe depression for the past 2 years. Because of the tremendous stress and sense of responsibility that came with the company's success." I looked at my husband in shock. "Depression? Why didn't you tell me about that?" My husband lowered his head and answered, "It was because of my pride. I couldn't say that a successful businessman had depression. I didn't want to show you my weak side either." My husband continued his confession. He couldn't sleep every night and suffered from anxiety. Meetings with people became burdensome. So he distanced himself from family too, and most of all, knowing he was hurting his beloved family. While not knowing what to do, he isolated himself even more. "It wasn't because I didn't love you. Rather, I loved you too much and didn't want to show you my broken state. But I only now realize that my feelings hurt you even more." Tears welled up in my husband's eyes. "I recently started psychiatric counseling and am receiving medication treatment. Only then did I begin to see how wrong I was." My husband knelt down and asked for my forgiveness. "I'm not angry that you met another man. I know I don't have the right to be. I just want to ask if we can start over now. I will really change." At that moment, I was speechless. All the emotions I had built up while resenting my husband crumbled in an instant. It wasn't because he didn't love me, but because he was dealing with his own pain alone. I was overcome with deep regret and remorse. After hearing my husband's confession, I couldn't say anything for a while. I realized how selfish I had been, and how I had completely failed to understand my husband's pain. I also shed tears and knelt before my husband. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were suffering so much. I was very wrong too." I honestly confessed everything about Min-soo to my husband. How it started as a simple hobby group, but gradually became emotional dependence, and how I continued the relationship out of a sense of revenge against my husband. I was ashamed throughout, but I could no longer lie. After listening to my confession to the end, my husband quietly said, "I can't blame you. I failed to do what I should have done as a husband. But let's start over now." He held me tight, and at that moment, I felt safety for the first time in a long while. I realized how lonely and anxious I had been. The next day, I called Min-soo and told him I would end everything. "I'm sorry, teacher. I don't think I can meet you anymore. I've decided to start over with my husband." Min-soo was silent for a moment, then said, "Your happiness is most important. I think it's a good decision." His understanding response made me feel even more sorry, but I was convinced this was the right thing to do. From that day, my husband and I began earnestly working toward relationship recovery. My husband delegated much of his company work to the vice president and promised to prioritize family time after 7 p.m. It was awkward at first, but gradually he regained his former affectionate demeanor. We designated every Saturday as family day. We spent time watching movies with the children, going to amusement parks, or cooking together at home. The children were delighted to see their father's changed behavior. When our daughter asked, "Dad, why do you come home so often these days?" my husband honestly apologized, saying, "Dad neglected you and Mom too much." My husband continued receiving psychiatric treatment. And I also met with a counselor to understand and support his treatment process. The counselor told me, depression is not just the patient's problem alone, but something the entire family must overcome together. I learned more about my husband's condition and could understand his behavior. After a few months, laughter returned to our home. My husband began helping the children with homework again, and we shared sincere conversations and opened our hearts to each other. I also came to understand my husband more deeply, and we promised not to try to solve difficulties alone, but to honestly confide in each other when problems arose. One evening, my husband took my hand and said, "Thanks to you, I was able to come back to life." "Thank you." I shook my head and replied, "It's thanks to both of us." This is really a new beginning. Writing this now and looking back on that time, I think that crisis actually became an opportunity for us as a couple to love each other more deeply. If there are readers experiencing similar difficulties, I hope you will have the courage to engage in honest dialogue before misunderstandings and distrust deepen further. Sometimes the darkest moments can be the starting point for discovering new light.